streams is so that we can talk about LGBTQ stuff, we can talk about mental health, and I don't understand why on earth it would literally try and want to stream my OBS window. But there we go. I've made it small enough that it's hidden behind you on stream. That'll do. What a polished start. So welcome everyone. Aim of these streams is to talk about. Basically, I was thinking that I've been putting the LGBTQIA tag in my streams for a while, and I've been putting the mental health tag in my streams for a while, and I'm really keen that this is a safe space that people can come to. And where we can discuss those things. And it kind of hit on me that, that's not going to just naturally happen necessarily while playing games. So actually it'd be really good to have some of these conversations and make a special space for them where we can chat about them. So that was the philosophy. Hopefully it's going to be a really safe and nurturing space where we can learn together. We can ask lots of questions. I'm going to be joined by a guest each week as well, which I'm going to use to hopefully get, some of the depth of diversity in our community to come in, and so we can hit on matters of intersectionality and stuff as well, and think about how these things affect all of us differently. And to that end, I am joined this evening by the lovely Kate Hutchinson. Do you want to start by just giving a brief introduction to yourself, Kate, who you are, kind of a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm Kate Hutchinson. I wear many hats, to be honest. I find myself involved in a lot of things, mostly around campaign around the LGBTQIA plus sort of community. I work with Will for a start. A fantastic LGBT plus education charity called Diversity Role Models. I also work with a few Pride organisations, so Pride Cymru, Chester Pride. Yeah, lots of stuff, to be honest. Schools Out UK. I forget, but yeah, I'm involved in a lot of that. Do some mental health stuff as well around well-being and the LGBT community. So.
Fabulous. And we got 4 people on stream with us now, so we're growing. Do feel free, if you've joined us on stream, the stream chat is there. I'll be keeping an eye on it. So if you have comments, you want to ask questions, all of that kind of stuff. Real Celtic Gamer made it. Hello, Real Celtic. Welcome. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about, Kate, was, your journey is one that I've heard a few times, and I find massively inspirational. So I guess, how did you end up being the proud, confident person that you are today?
Good question.
Maybe that's a loaded question, and I know you constantly talk to us about imposter syndrome and stuff, but I see you as proud and confident. So let's just take it at that.
Growing up, I had zero confidence because I always felt disjointed. Mm-hmm. As somebody who's trans and growing up in the 1970s, when there was the only visibility you ever saw of trans people was generally negative, so if I saw somebody on the TV and I saw the way they were treated in that documentary, it made me think, yeah, that's me. But then, oh, right, okay, I'm just going to hide out here, with not being visible. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I didn't see any positive visibility, and I can remember being in school and having to do, presentations. I'd know, like reading a chapter out of a book or writing a book report and having to get up in front of the class, mm-hmm. and absolutely being terrified and ended up laughing, mm-hmm. Just in this sort of laughter that the teacher then sort of told me off for because they thought I wasn't taking it seriously, when in reality I was absolutely terrified, and it was just that sort of reaction. Until, many years, I tried to transition a couple of times in my life. Got to the point where I did, and I could say it finally stuck, where I had a really good support network around me, and that was the important thing. And that's where the confidence started to come in. It just grew. I can speak in front of people now where I couldn't speak before. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. And yeah, I can really speak sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's so true, isn't it? Having those people who are there, who are supporting you and lifting you up and cheerleading from you and just letting you be yourself. Like, it always strikes me that's one of the biggest things that makes such a difference. to people. It seems like such a simple thing.
Absolutely, it's a massive thing. Because I mean, other things I do. I'm a musician and I played in bands for years. So you think I wouldn't be that scared of it because I've been getting up on stages forever since I could pick up a guitar. But I would never be on that microphone before then.
Yeah.
I didn't have that confidence. I'd be the person who'd be the way I used to do it. I used to get on stage. And in my head, I was doing Let's Pretend that I was playing a character. So the nerves seemed to go somewhere else. So I spent most of my life pretending to be something I wasn't. But that's how I got through it. But you would never catch me on that microphone or near a microphone to speak to the crowd or to say anything. I was always the one who would hide away. Now you can't shut me up.
I totally I understand that character thing. I was, you might relate to this as well as a fellow streamer. I remember earlier during lockdown, I was talking to one of my friends about my mental health and talking about how how no one gets to see the real Will, and he was like, "Oh, but what about on stream?" And I was like, "Well, that's not necessarily the real Will." And he's like, "Well, what about when you're streaming and it says that no one's watching?" And it's like, well, even then, I think like from the moment I press that button to go live, I'm like, I'm gonna play this character. And we all play characters so much throughout our life, and it's something that to an extent is natural and healthy, but it can also be used in really unhealthy ways and to extremes that's not good for us. When it's about no one seeing the real us, that's a problem.
Yeah, because exactly, and I do that when I'm streaming because, as you know, I stream too, and I do go into that character, but I do that a lot, even professionally. If I've got to give a presentation in front of people, thinking I've got to present it in a certain way and it's got to be quite dynamic, it helps to get that across in that way.
Yeah.
But it does mask those other sides. So that has a negative thing in the fact that a lot of people think I'm a super confident person because of that with everything. And I'm generally not. I can be the quiet person. I can be the person who's afraid to go up to ask for help in a shop sometimes because I'm worried about a reaction I might get from just talking to somebody.
Yeah.
And yet you can stick me, I don't know, on a stage at a Pride in front of 15,000 people. I'm going to be like that because in my head, I'm projecting that sort of character. But it helps as well. And it does, it does help increase my confidence on the other side of my life doing that. I mean, but not by much. It's like little steps, I think.
Real Celtic Gamer has said in the chat, finally someone understands what it's like to feel disjointed. I'm actually crying right now. There we go. Wow. Bless you. Let's hope we can make it all as powerful and as impactful for the rest of you as we go. Still. I'm really interested as well in this act of performance and of not showing your authentic self. And I guess to what extent how do you feel that takes a toll and did take a toll on your mental health? I'm guessing especially that performance was at its most extreme and its most exaggerated for pre-transition Kate. That was when it was creating the most tension.
Without a doubt, when I found myself performing, probably at points I was performing toxic masculinity around other people to be part of a group, to fit in with a group, because I was afraid of being discovered for who I was as well. One thing that comes to mind, and I've told this story even in schools, I remember when I worked in a previous job, and the job I was in was a very male-dominated job. Nearly, I'd say 95% of the people who were in that role that I did were all male.
Yeah.
And as a trans person who was so far in the closet, I was in Narnia. It was a real self-conscious thing. And we used to have a trans woman who used to deliver to our depot every day.
Yeah.
And as she would come in, I would hear people use transphobic language around her. And use a masculinized version of her name and things like that, and that would have a heck of an effect on me. If somebody was not out, I would hear that transphobia, and it was the same. I would hear the same thing. We had out gay staff in that that job. If they left the room, sometimes I would hear homophobic language come out if they were
Yeah,
present.
yeah.
And I so wanted to tackle that, and I so wanted to stand up for that, but I found I didn't at times. And it's one thing now. I think now I've got the strength where I would stand up and say that's not on. But back then I was so afraid of then being turned on and being bullied myself that I kept quiet. And it's something I'm not proud of. But then it was a survival technique as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that, and you see that so much in schools, don't you? Like the number of young people who, young LGBTQ people who talk about, being ashamed at some of the language and stuff they've used, but because it was their way of deflecting attention from themselves. Like, I don't want you looking at me and thinking, why am I the one who's standing up? Who's standing up to this? Which also comes from this really sad place that assumes that, as is so often the case for minorities, this place that assumes that it's up to the minority to make the change and make the difference. And that's why people assume that the people who want to say something must be part of that group.
Yeah, there's that thing about the minority groups educating as well, always educating other people. And sometimes it would be nice if people who needed that education to sometimes take that initiative themselves.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. But, it's never going to stop me from being an educator, because that's what I do and that's what I'm proud to do and really love doing. But it would be nice sometimes to know that it's not all just
up to you
pushing, that people genuinely want to engage and genuinely want to find out about that.
Yeah, no, I talk about that in my story as well in schools. In my secondary story, I talk about I talk about some of my friends when I came out, and I'm very mindful in particular of my one of my best friends, Beck, who she actually ended up being one of the best girls at my wedding. And I've only many years later found out that she found it really difficult, and she really struggled to understand and to get her head around it. And she didn't feel the need to say any of that to me. Like, she went off and she spoke to other people and she asked other people questions. She was like, I can see Will's vulnerable. Will's in a place where he's finding this really difficult. I'm not going to burden him with all of these questions. I'm going to go and ask someone else instead. I really appreciated that. So the interesting comment coming in the chat from Real Content Gamer. They say, as a gender diverse person, I've actually encountered worse bigotry from non-trans / non-gender diverse people within the LGBTQIA plus community. How big a problem do you think it? I mean, I know it's a problem. I'm not. How big a problem do you think it is within our community?
I mean,
I know maybe it's what parts you put yourself in is obviously also going to help, but.
Yeah, I've experienced it myself. The fact that I'm bi as well as being trans, so there's a lot of bi erasure that goes on.
Yeah.
It's like if I was in a relationship with a guy, then I would be seen as straight. If I was in a relationship with a girl, I'm seen as being a lesbian. But I'm not. I'm bi. I might be in a same-sex relationship at one time or anything like that, but I'm bi. So sometimes I see that, and I hear a lot of language that is biphobic.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a lot of it within the LGBT community. So I see that as being a big problem.
Oh, you get it so much. All of this, like, it's just a phase. Oh, we all knew, when someone who came out first as bi then comes out as gay and all this stuff. And it's like such bollocks. Yeah. Like, we should know better.
Absolutely. But I've experienced out and out transphobia walking down, I don't know, Canal Street in Manchester. I can remember there. Somebody shouting over from a seated area outside of a bar once. And I know, bars there that won't tolerate that. But when you've got somebody on a summer afternoon and I actually feel, even though, that's supposed to be, it's got a reputation for being a community space. But I sometimes feel more uneasy walking down there because I'm aware that people are almost looking out for it. It just feels like that. And I've probably had I've had a good fair share of abusive situations in what are supposed to be safe spaces, which is
sad. Yeah, that's so sad. I guess that's something I'm always aware of as it's just I'm in that fortunate place where it's just not my experience, but therefore it's so important for those of us, especially white, gay, cis men, who are in that position where, you know, we're not the ones who are being made to feel unwelcome. It's so important for us to be conscious of people's behaviour around us and call out that behaviour when we see it, and make sure that these spaces can be inviting and welcoming. You know, it's kind of my responsibility. So Will says in the chat, how do you think we can all be better queer allies for one another? I guess, you know, we know there's a problem. What's the solution? What's Kate Hutchinson's solution? If you had your magic wand that you could wave, what would the world look like?
On this, I did a panel on this exact subject the other day, actually, with Pride Cymru. We did, what was it called? The Rainbow Family, or Unite. It was basically about exactly that. A thing that always came to me is that at the moment, you know, there's still quite a lot of inequality in our group of LGBTQ.
Yeah.
Plus whatever. There are certain groups that, you know, suffer probably more oppression and more negative situations at the moment than other parts of it. And I think it's really important for some of us to use our privilege to sometimes either amplify the voices of those who are currently having that hard time or facing the barriers, or sometimes for us to step back as well and push them forward.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even within the trans community, so at the moment, a lot of the non-binary community there's parts of the trans community that I hear negativity towards the non-binary community.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people like me, white trans women who within the trans community, I've got a lot of privilege there, to be honest. And
yeah.
I know we do suffer a lot of negative stuff outside of that bubble, but sometimes I think, you know, I should step back, and here's trans people of colour who need their voices, you know, amplifying and need to be seen and need to be heard. So, you know, I will step off a panel and say, give that panel place to somebody else who needs their voice amplifying. So I would say things like that sometimes. Try and be mindful of your own voice and your own privilege, and maybe use that to support other people within the community who might need it a little bit more.
I was thinking as well, I noticed that Will's kind of also mentioned in a previous comment, he's mentioned, you know, how Black Lives Matters and, you know, movements like that are revealing how much we can all learn more, you know, within our communities and from each other. And that was just making me reflect on as well, as you were talking about giving someone else that space on the platform, how I was really struck during a lot of that kind of peak period of Black Lives Matter in 2020, the 2020 phase of Black Lives Matter, by, you know, I could see all of these people around me tweeting about it. But I don't know, like I really dislike virtue signaling, and so much to me, there was an extent to me to which it came off as virtue signaling, because it was just because of who I follow predominantly, white gay men having their thing to say about Black Lives Matter. And I decided quite early on that actually I didn't say anything about it. I just retweeted black people talking about Black Lives Matter. And like, actually, that's what I would do. I wouldn't assume that I could go on a panel and talk about Black Lives Matter. Why would I assume I can use my Twitter position to be someone who's going to talk about it?
Absolutely. There was actually one of our role models who put some stuff out, and I was looking at their stuff, and I thought, how can I support you and get some of, you know, your tweets and your sort of posts out there? And I just had this brief conversation. He was about, just repost my posts, get them out there, do that. And I think that's right. You know, it's amplifying voices.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is my opinion. It's like, these are voices you need to listen to, not me, this person, because that's their experience.
Yeah, they're the one with the the lived experience that they, you know, that they're sharing. Like, I don't have that, and therefore, I guess I feel the same way about, you know, other parts of our community, whether that's gay and lesbian women, whether it's the trans community, non-binary community, people of color. You know, it's who am I to speak for you? I can amplify what you're saying. You know, I can act like a megaphone, That to me feels like one of the best things to do, rather than I don't know. It feels like at times in our community we spend all of this time criticizing companies and brands that stick a rainbow flag on their logo once a year in June and then take it off at the end. And then I see people being like, on Trans Day of Visibility or Trans Day of Remembrance, being like, yeah, I'm trans inclusive, and they're doing it for, like, let's not do it for one day. Let's do it all year round.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's a two-sided thing, isn't it? I see some of the times they criticise a lot of companies because they do it around Pride, but they don't see how some of those companies do staff networks and etc. and do that. And part of the reason they do it in Pride is to support their staff networks as well, which a lot of people don't always sort of realise. But yeah, really good points. I mean, that is true. You wish it was just, we need to have inclusion.
Exactly. For me, it's this thing of it's this thing that's slightly bordering on hypocrisy of like, we're calling out companies for just doing it for a set period and in a way that looks tokenistic. And then I see so many people doing it in a way that looks tokenistic on a single day when it's a different part of the community from them. And it feels like if we want to be a community, it's about not segregating different parts of the community, whether that's into this is your day, this is our day, or this is your space, this is our space, or on whatever level. It's about coexisting, and thriving together all the time. Not just some of the time, not just when she who will not be named has tweeted something on Twitter, and that's when we're going to decide that we're gonna lift up our trans siblings. We could lift up our trans siblings all of the time. And in fact, I feel, I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear your take on this, because it's something that I think about and I'm conscious of. The number of people that I see, and they do this on all sorts of things on social media. It's not just to do with LGBTQIA rights. The number of people I see seeing the Wizard Lady tweeting and then quote tweeting the Wizard Lady with that anger, and I just look at it, I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you sharing that? Like, I don't understand. How does that feel to you as someone who's trans, to have people, even though they're trying to do it from a place when they're like, this is awful and it's bollocks, to basically be sharing a load of transphobic rubbish?
It can really wear you down. I mean, this is the mental health thing, I suppose, as well, because even though that retweet might be with a positive intent saying this is a load of rubbish, you're still seeing that thing again, and it's still in your view.
That putting the transphobia onto your timeline again.
And I see a lot of friends who have come off social media completely just because of that, not even because it was anything targeted maliciously.
Yeah.
It's because they're sick of seeing a news report from, I don't know, one of the major sort of LGBT news outlets might put something out there and saying, oh, look how awful this is. But you're seeing it again and again and again every single day. There's a certain Sunday newspaper that put out there was one period for about 2 years where there was not a Sunday where they didn't have one story about trans people in it. And it really does get you down. And I've got to the point where every once in a while I've switched, believe it or not, for me, switched my phone off for like 24 hours and walked away. And even though I get twitchy in that time, I'm like, no, I'll go and play games or I'll do something else.
Yeah.
And I try and avoid any form of media that might get to me, just purely for self-care at that point.
Because it's so awful that you're in that position where you have to take yourself out of it, where Twitter can't be a friendly, happy, supportive space that's not going to wear your mental health down.
I don't like Twitter, and I have 2 separate Twitter accounts because I have a one I use for work and work use, which is the one that gets the abuse, and I have one, that isn't. It's just where all my happy stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's more for my sort of gaming, writing, all other bits and pieces. But yeah, social media can be a real sort of downer as far as mental health goes sometimes if you're locked into it so much. And to be honest, I mean, professionally and what I do even voluntarily because of all the organisations, I put myself out there, to be honest. I'm right out there, and when you do stick your head up above the parapet sometimes to shout about human rights, whatever, part of human rights you're shouting about, sooner or later somebody's likely going to come along and try and take a pop at you, to use a phrase. You're going to be a little bit of a target, no matter whether you're just somebody who's sat in your room and really angry and vocal about it and put something out on Twitter, one or two things out on Twitter, or whether you're somebody who's got national newspapers to publish your views. Eventually somebody will come and challenge them.
Yeah. Bear with me one moment. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I've just banned someone while we're talking. So that's done with. There is also somebody who's asked in the chat about, the question they've posed is how do you report a Twitch channel? But I guess so there's a question as well, thinking about the space that we're in right here. How do you feel this space is at supporting LGBTQIA people?
I have not had any issues myself as yet, but I do hear of them, I can think, 2 days ago, I rebroadcast a panel of trans folks I did for something I put together for Chester Pride. And I had transphobic remarks come up from somebody because it was just set with a just chatting tag. And you tend to get a lot of what I would call randoms come in. They're not always specific. So
yeah.
I just saw this one on there, banned them off and reported them to Twitch. So I don't know if anything else will happen from that. But it is easy as that, right click on the name and,
get rid of them.
Ban them.
Gone.
Ban, block. That's the best way to deal with it, and send a report off. You might not always get anything actioned or hear of anything actioned, but I think the real important thing is that you clear it out of your site.
At least they're not going to come into your space again. They're not going to come and upset your community and threaten them. That's the control that we have as streamers.
They're the ones with the issues, not you, and you can ban them from your space. And as they come along, that's one less that's going to bother me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There seems to be an interesting discussion going on in the chat as well now about the retweeting thing we were talking about. So Real Celtic Gamer has said, friends I follow on Twitter who retweet transphobic bollocks they're angry about has made me feel suicidal. Really sorry to hear that, Real Celtic Gamer. And by all means, everyone, please remember, if you feel in that place, there are lots of organisations you can reach out to. Here in the UK, it'd be the Samaritans, lots of organisations around the world that are there if you're in that place. I understand why they retweet it to a degree, but I don't want it on my timeline. And lovely Nintendori has said, I never thought about that. It makes me think about all the times I've retweeted things. So I think it's really good for us to be discussing these things.
An important thing to think about as well when you're retweeting, if you're retweeting a news outlet that generally publish the negative stories, so if it's not coming from a sympathetic source, you're probably on some level going to be creating revenue for them, because if you retweet it, they will click on that website. It's a click on their website. It pays their advertisers. There's some great groups out there as well, like Stop Funding Hate and people like that who do a lot of work around that, trying to get people to pull back advertising from organizations that are funding hate.
And when it's also just like, I always think you're just giving air to it. Like, different arena, not specifically necessarily about LGBTQIA, but like I would look at the number of people who would retweet Kate Hutchinson when she was still on Twitter with comment and be like, this is awful, she shouldn't be here. It's like, yeah, but now you're making her tweet be seen loads more. Like, this is literally what you're doing. Like, if you disengage, then she's not getting a rise out of you, and trolls go away when they don't get the rise out of you because it ceases to be fun to them.
That's exactly it. It's all about getting the attention in that case, isn't it?
But yeah, I've just never understood it. I think the question I tried to ask is, as specifically as an an ally to the trans community, you know, for those who are in this chat, maybe who are allies, who wants to think about these things. And I am going to get to exactly what you've said, you know, T, as well, because that's one of the things that I think about. For, you know, if I'm going to retweet something, if I want to talk about it, I want to engage first from a place of empathy, you know, and I want to think if someone was saying this about my identity, would I want to see that? It's a really simple question to ask yourself. And it really helps. And then I do often do what T has suggested as well in the chat. They say maybe instead of retweeting these things, we can instead retweet positive things about these issues, links to educational sites or famous things from history. Absolutely. You know, I like to, we'll talk about the wizard lady again, especially when the wizard lady comes up. You know, I want to tweet and lift up my trans siblings. You know, I can see that they're being dragged down, so I want to lift them up, not share the thing that's dragging them down. That doesn't make sense. You know, I want to tweet about how important they are to me, you know, how important they are to me, trans lives matter, or, you know, trans women are women. You know, there are all those things that we can just tweet, you know, and those things that we can put on our profiles as well. Like putting your pronouns on your profile is a really great thing to do. You know, it's about normalizing profile use for people, and it's about a way of indicating that actually I'm hopefully going to be a space that's safe for you. You know, you can come and look at me and see that I've put my pronouns, and that tells you something about me.
Straight away, that sends a massive signal out, and it's something so simple. You know, and I've seen the negativity sometimes, or heard of it in some spaces where they go, why do I need to do that? It's like, well, you know what? Even if you take trans away from the whole pronouns thing, you're just assuming somebody's gender identity by their name. So what about somebody, say, who's got the name Alex, and they sign their email? Would you know their gender identity? And to be honest, yeah, it's a funny one. But
I know, and when it's also, I always think, you know, whenever I hear someone saying the oh, but why do we have to do that thing? It's like, well, but that's where you're not quite understanding your privilege, because you've never had to do that, because people have assumed your pronouns, and they've assumed your pronouns correctly. You are in a position of privilege where that's what happens. Like, it's not for you that you have to, you know, it's for everyone else that we're normalizing talking about pronouns and normalizing not assuming what someone's pronouns are. Because that's, you know, we're in the fortunate position where people assume our pronouns and they get it right. So we don't understand that pain and that hurt of people making that assumption. And
yeah, for somebody early, sort of might be early in transition, it can really hurt earlier on. I always found it does. It still occasionally still happens now, but it's not like those sort of, I can remember early days for me where it felt like a knife through the heart, you know, if you heard one, because you were trying so hard to sort of embrace you, and it was horrible. But saying that, on the other side of things, if you ever get it, this is a great piece of advice, to be honest. If you ever make a mistake with somebody's pronouns, don't make a huge deal over it.
I saw a tweet about exactly this today. Yeah.
You know, to say, oh, sorry, correct yourself and carry on. Don't go, oh my God. And I've had that happen where somebody, they had all the best intent. You know, no worries at all about that. It was just that they made a big scene about it, and I was in a public place and I got really self-conscious because of that. Just say sorry and correct yourself and move on. No big deal. We know when somebody means to offend and when they don't.
And this tweet that I saw today was also specifically talking about people who keep bringing up and like keep saying sorry forever. And it's like, well, the best way to show that you're sorry is to just use the correct pronouns going forward. You know, and I'm sure, you know, again, it's not my experience, you know, but I'm sure that you and my trans siblings, you know, that means the world to you, because that shows that you notice that someone who's got it wrong then doesn't get it wrong. You know, I'm sure you do, and that speaks volumes to you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because it's still, I only realised in the last 12 months that it's still a thing that's always in the back of my head when I go into a new a new social situation, say for people I've never met before. It's like that whole thing between our community anyway, of being always having to out yourself, or always being aware that you might be outing yourself. And I'm as out as it gets, but I don't. It's not the way I introduce myself to every person I meet is by talking about my identity and my sexual orientation. It's not something I do every time. But I remember when I met my current partner sort of last year, and I got to know all of her friends, and you start to get to know that group. And in the back of my head, I realized in certain situations I was getting slightly tense because I was almost waiting for somebody to either misgender me or do something like that, or maybe ask one of those questions. And you know what? It never happened, not even once, from like all of her friends. And we've been together for 18 months, something like that now. And that astounded me, and that really gave me a lot of hope as well, because I always expect it occasionally, which you shouldn't have to. But that was nice, that really was nice. But it made me aware of how there is that part of my brain that is still slightly on alert, waiting for it.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I definitely know that feeling. Yeah, I do. Yeah, that feeling when you just feel you start feeling on edge as well, and you're like walking down the street, and there's someone who just, and you're just like, actually, are we in that? As it's talked about a lot within the gay community, like, are you in that place where you can feel comfortable holding your hands, or are you not?
Yeah, it's a heteronormative assumptions by society as well. If somebody comes to the door, if you're male and you answer the door, they might ask for your wife, or the other way around. There's quite often I still see those assumptions of heterosexual relationships whenever it comes to engagements with businesses. Sometimes even, I've even known actually gay friends who've found themselves doing that in a job when they've rang somebody up on the phone, because it's that conditioning and it's that whole societal thing that we need to really try and get ourselves out of. But it's still going to take time, but we need to carry on doing it. And so anybody who says, oh no, LGBT folks, they've got it all fine, no, we don't need to do all this anymore. No, we really do. We're still miles and miles away from where we need to be. Until we've got those days where we're not afraid to hold our partner's hand walking down the road, where you know for sure you're not going to get discriminated against in healthcare because of who you love or what your identity is. In schools, until we like young people go to school and be completely unafraid of the thought that they might get bullied just for who they're attracted to.
Yeah, no, totally. I've always felt I look at the mental health outcomes for the LGBT community broadly, but then I also especially look at those mental health outcomes for the trans community, and I just sit there and I think, this is ludicrous. Like, if any other group had mental health outcomes like this, we would be saying, this is an emergency, this is a crisis, this is something that we have to sort. And it's this big flashing sign there to society saying, hang on a minute, this isn't on. this isn't good for everyone. And people just ignore it. I just find it astonishing and distressing, the number of people who just try and brush that aside.
Yeah, some people try and cast doubt on some of the figures as well, and I know for a fact, unfortunately, that those figures are pretty damn accurate. I have seen, there was an American, there was a poster put out, I'm trying to think which organisation did it now, it was a US one, where it showed some of the positive statistics around if young people from the communities are supported, so if their families support them, because it's things like level of homelessness in the amount of, if you look at young homeless people, the percentage that are LGBT is fairly staggering.
Doesn't AKT reckons that about 50% of young homeless people are LGBTQ, which is like horrifying. I mean, like that which presumably makes it the number one cause of homelessness amongst young people in the country. You'd think that would be something would want to tackle. Go after the number one cause is the one you should be going after first, because that's the biggest group that you can shrink down.
Absolutely.
It's just like there was something that came to mind. I'm just trying to see if it can come back. Oh yeah, no. So you were talking about knowing how prevalent this is in our community, and I guess it's made me think as well about I've been trying, especially in 2020, especially since about February. Well, it was Mental Health Awareness Week was when I really started talking about my mental health on Twitter. And I'm trying to be really open about my mental health and the struggles that I go through and how I feel about things. And I guess that's also me being. It's not just me being an ally and being supportive to other people in their mental health struggles, but it's also me supporting our community in particular, because actually we really need to normalize talking about it in our community, because if it's even more prevalent here, then it's a space where we need to talk about it, and we need to not have people thinking that the experience they're going through is one that only that they have to struggle through alone, and that only they're going to have. We need to not put people in our community in particular, where it's so prevalent, in a place where they're not reaching out for the support and help that they need.
Absolutely. I mean, mental health. I mean, I suffer with depression and anxiety. I always have. Again, people quite often have then tried to make that about me and my transness, which is not a thing, because I've always dealt with depression one way or the other. I still deal with it now. So I'm a generally happy person in who I am, but I still deal with that, and I quite openly talk about it. I feel like reaching out for me is the thing that keeps me going, and getting a good support network around me where I feel safe and I've got people I can at least engage with.
Yeah.
I think that's. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say just a couple of comments from the chat then. So Tia is saying the issue of the mental health crisis in LGBT plus is that to change it, you have to change social views. And the reason there is a high amount of mental health difficulties in LGBT plus is life is harder due to discrimination. Absolutely, and also they go on to mention, the same is true with mental health diagnosis in Black and ethnic minorities, and other, certain parts of the male community, certain parts of the female community, definitely. But I guess the thing that I find really interesting there is societal attitudes have changed a lot. They've changed a hell of a lot. So for me, it's partly about thinking about attitudes, and it's partly about thinking about what's not changed, and when we look at our work in schools, we know that young people's attitudes have changed massively, but actually their behaviors haven't necessarily changed. They still think it's acceptable to use certain language, and they don't understand the impact that language has on their peers. And in fact, they're horrified when they realize, you mean I'm making my LGBT peers, feel alienated, feel excluded, feel that it gets to points of, depression, anxiety, contemplating suicide, and that I'm part of that. I think it's really interesting that, we talk a lot about attitudes, and I think we need to talk about behaviours as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about what we do as well, when we see that impact. I couldn't go for very long without talking about DRM. When you see sometimes the penny drop, to use a phrase, with young people sometimes in schools, when they realise, because it's maybe language they've learned from outside of school, from a parent, from a relative, from whoever, and they have no idea about the actual impact or intent of that language originally.
Yeah.
And then we have people up there, because we take role models from the community in there to talk about their experiences, and when they talk to these young people about how it felt to them to hear that language used towards them, maybe with hate or violence sometimes, about that sort of effect, and they're like, I didn't realize that meant that, or that hurt people in that way. And we see from those feedback sheets we get about the positive effect we get, where they completely change the thinking around sometimes about compassion and understanding of difference.
Yeah, it strikes me as well, and I think it's not just. I mean, so few people think about some of these things. I'm really struck. There's a word which I'm not going to say because I don't like it, but there is a word that essentially in its roots means someone who's a sexual predator. That has really been used against the LGBTQ community over the years, which suddenly everyone seems to be using. And I look at people on Twitter, and suddenly, you know, someone they disagree with is X, and I'm just like, where did this come from? Why did people decide this word? How can you not see that this word might be, you know, this word that has predominantly been used to attack one community for a long, long time, that this might be problematic? I don't know. I find it really interesting that people just can't see these things. There we go.
They find the thing that they think is most socially unacceptable and use that to hurt people with because they know it's a word that hurts.
Yeah. And I guess they feel like because it doesn't literally mean something to do with sexuality or gender identity, it does have a very different meaning. I don't know. Maybe people have forgotten that connection, and that word was used a lot in that way.
It's about causing pain and hurt and, you know, making somebody feel uncomfortable by using that word towards them. It's all about, I mean, it's a form of violence, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. To some more stuff. I'm going to read some more stuff in the chat because there have been lots of lovely things. Lots of responses coming in the chat. Nintendo said, sadly, it's not the first time that the LGBT plus community has been ignored in a health crisis. Which, you know, very true. As long as we get people to actually start talking about it, things will change. Might be slow, but they will. People need to actually talk about it, though. Totally agree. And, you know, yes, certainly LGBTQ history shows us that people are not good at responding to our health needs. You know, T is saying there's a difference between knowing a thing, believing a thing, and doing a thing. Absolutely. Absolutely is, you know, and that's, as I say, it's something for us to talk about. Really, it's really important, especially for me, this conversation about fostering active allies, because, you know, going and saying to young people, it's great that you're I'm trying to look for the right word. Supportive is not the right word. You know, it's great that you have positive attitudes towards our community. Now let's talk about what you can actually do. There was another one. An interesting Real Celtic Gamer says, I think it's worse now because our community is more visible than, say, 20 years ago. I think that's a really interesting one. And I think potentially I think that's something that impacts upon parts of our community more than others. I don't know how you feel about that, Kate.
I think that's true, very true. I mean, we're getting more acceptance, but then that means that more people feel comfortable to come out, but then that also means more visibility means more people whose, as I said, heads are above the parapet sometimes.
Yeah.
And they, you know, become targets, which they should never. But yeah, with increased visibility, that does come. But I think, I hope that we get to a point where that starts to tail off. I think it'll probably hit a peak or a plateau and then, you know, dip.
Yeah. I mean, it also feels to me like for those of you in the trans community, it feels like we are at, you know, this is a flashpoint. And a flashpoint that is happening because legislative change is being considered, you know, and it's the same way that there was a flashpoint back in, why can't I remember when they put 2012, 2013, when they were publishing the Same-Sex Marriage Act. You know, there was a flashpoint there as well. You know, and any time someone tries to push our rights forward legislatively, it causes a whole load of people who we kind of like to imagine have gone away to rear their ugly heads, and we suddenly notice that actually they're all still there all along.
Yeah, I mean, because I see a lot of the stuff. Quite often, a lot of people talk about the trans community being about 20 years behind the rest of like LGB as far as a lot of our rights or just understanding in general. And a thing that really pops out to me at the moment is a lot of stuff that's focused towards the trans community that's negative from certain groups at the moment. And I see some of it on certain online forums that I'm not going to even give them
I think I can imagine.
Yeah, and certain even parts of the press. And even some of the headlines are exactly the same as the headlines that were used towards the LGBT community back in 1988, 89, when Section 28 was brought in, which silenced a lot of LGBT voices back then. Well, not silenced, but I would say muted.
Yeah.
Because of that. But yeah. So that's quite disturbing in quite a few ways, but it also makes me think, we've constantly got to be, at the moment, we still constantly got to fight for those rights, because sometimes if you start to relax, there's nothing that ever says people can't pull stuff back.
Yeah.
And bigotry is still out there in many, many different forms, and if we give it the air to breathe, it will try and, start to sit on the rights of people that it shouldn't be. And I'm not just talking about, the LGBT community. I'm talking about lots of different communities. I'm talking about people of color. I'm talking about disability rights. I'm talking about lots of different groups.
Yeah, definitely. I had loads of thoughts and now they've all dissipated again. I don't know why this keeps happening.
I go on too much.
No, it's all interesting. So let's pivot to, we've got a question from Will that came in that he had. So he said, and I know lovely Will is very heavily involved in Pride in London, so it's coming from, a position where he's involved as well. And obviously you're involved in multiple Prides. So Will says, with Prides completely having to change this year due to COVID, what's one thing that Prides could do to be more inclusive and supportive year round, and to really drive that active allyship message?
I think a lot of Pride should do a lot more community engagement than they currently do. So running programs all year round, going out, getting funding to try and do projects that show them as a visible organisation all the way through. I've stepped back from Prides previously because they weren't doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, funny enough, there's Pride that I'd been with where I stepped back from them because it felt like it was moving to being what I called at the time before I walked out, a party in a car park, using slightly stronger language than that. And then I walked away, but then now that organisation has really stepped up and they're running lots of local community, support things. So things for organisations for the older LGBT community. So support around that, support around the trans communities. They're helping to get youth groups funded in the local area, things like that, which is fantastic. And I think that should be what they're doing. Engaging with the media as well, 24/7 all year round, trying to raise a little bit of awareness. I know that means constant fundraising and all the rest of it, but most Prides fundraise for 12 months in, leading up to the event anyway.
Yeah.
I just think they've got more responsibility to stand up and be proactive about engaging with the community and not just doing that one event.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of what Chester Pride and Pride Cymru do as far as that goes.
Absolutely. Uno T is asking me if I'm struggling to multitask. Welcome to the life of a streamer. Although, as I'm rapidly discovering, the downside of doing a Let's Talk with a guest is that, unlike a game which I can just not play for a while, our engagement, our conversation just continues. But that's good and it's exciting. I know what, I've remembered one of the things I was going to say. And it's something that you'll know about, but not necessarily. It's something I didn't talk about much on Twitter because I didn't want to give it much oxygen. But I was really struck by some of the attack that's happened towards our very own diversity role models over the past few months, because we've been at the middle of a bit of a pile on. And there was one night in particular where I saw. My boss basically told us not to go and look, but he was like, he was warning us that, there were people who were attacking the organisation, warning us that some of them had posted the staff page showing who worked for the organisation. So he was rightfully warning us. And he was like, but don't go and look. And being that's like catnip to me. I got a cat pun in. I got a cat pun into this stream. That was unexpected. It was like catnip to me, and I went and had a look. And there was one evening that it was so bad that Mark came home, and Mark found me in tears, sat on the bed crying about it. And for me, it was this moment of realization about seeing. Yeah, I've always felt empathy for my trans siblings, for what you have to go through, and with the stuff that's thrown at you constantly. But it was this slight little window that I suddenly had into what that world must actually be like, and I was crying at the end of the day.
It was very well. It was the same people who did.
I know, and saying the exactly same kind of, I could see, and it was that thing that you talked about, look at what people are saying about the trans community now, and it's what they were saying about the LGBT community 20 years ago, because these were exactly the same things. And I was like, wow, it gave me this moment of a bit more, like, now I can start to imagine
and it was
what it must be like for you to get that kind of stuff day after day after day.
It felt like that side of my work was suddenly jumbled in with my normal day job, if you know what I mean. Because I looked at that and I had exactly the same reactions as yourself there. I couldn't help but go and look, and I looked and I was like, no. I'm like, it's part of the reason I don't really do Twitter much, because I looked on there and it was absolutely horrific. And using language like you sort of indicated earlier, and it also made one good thing was there were a lot of good allies who were stepping up as well in there, but the degree of hate and the degree of venom, it was vile, it was completely unbalanced, it was horrendous, and it made me feel sick. I just literally just wanted to go to bed, pull a sheet over my head, and not wake up for like 3-4 days. I wanted to go and hide away, dig a hole in, and pull something over the top until it all went away. People don't realize the impact of their words sometimes, and don't even think about their words. That was horrific, though, because I'm so proud of what we do.
I'm so proud of what we do.
I've never been prouder to work for anyone in my entire life than that organisation. And I'm not just saying that because I want my job. No,
I'm just going to clip that one to send to Adam for you.
Hey, Adam, I said that. No, because I volunteered for DRM for a couple of years before I even started working for us. I'm just really passionate about that, trying to do positive change. But when you go in there with that intent to do positive change, and you see people coming in with that sort of negativity and that sort of venom, it's really disheartening. And you mentioned our own self-worth or imposter syndrome and things like this. We're thinking, are we right? Are we? What am I talking? No, I'm definitely not talking rubbish. I believe in what I say 100%.
Yeah. And I guess then it's also, in those situations for us as well, especially when you're putting yourself out there by, engaging with this work in your professional life, or, community activism, or doing it on a voluntary basis or whatever, it's even more, it's thinking about that impact. This becomes even more interwoven into who we are, even more deeply. And the fact that people will claim they're just attacking our work, but it hurts because our work is who we are. It's what we care about. It's what gets us up in the morning. It's, as I discovered over lockdown, it's some part of what gives me purpose. I found some people know, you obviously know Kate, and I know that you still are on furlough. I was on furlough for 3 months, and then had nearly another half a month off of that afterwards, on annual leave. So I spent about 3.5 months not working, and I just found it like the most difficult experience.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about that. I'm somebody who, for me, I don't do well as far as mental health goes if I'm sat doing nothing. So, because I've seen, it's one of those things actually with my mental health over the years, I've grown to spot patterns in myself. So when I know I'm deteriorating in some ways, I can see it be things like I might obsess about certain things or throw myself into something.
Yeah.
So for me, I told you I volunteer with a lot of different organizations. So in furlough, I just threw myself into that.
Kept
And
yourself
in the
busy.
last 2 weeks, I've probably been done more hours than if I was working full time. Just on putting together video content. It's like tomorrow I'm recording a trans healthcare Q&A with a clinician sort of in the field tomorrow for Pride Cymru's big week at the end of the week. So things like that, trying to still do something that keeps me occupied, maybe does something positive as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, absolutely. But yeah, and it, is my brain going to catch up with me again? Oh, it's gone. It's gone. Oh, Will's brain today. No, I was going to say, there we go. That's what it was. I was going to totally agree. And in fact, the thing that I found, I had to keep explaining this to my husband as well, because so Mark worked from home for about 2 or 3 weeks. It was actually a very short period that he wasn't allowed in the office for, and then wanted to go back to the office. I'm like, fine. And I have this kind of experience where when I don't do anything, when I stay in, kind of like the more that I stay in, paradoxically, the more difficult it becomes for me to go out. Like I really notice if, like at the moment, I'm getting up on a weekday. I get up, I'll take the dogs out for a walk at about 8 in the morning. Because I know that if I don't take the dogs out before I work, then it's going to become progressively difficult for me to leave the house throughout the day. And I'm going to reach that point when I finish work and I'm going to be like, the outside world's a big scary place. And that's what I found in lockdown. Just this whole, like, it's so distorted, everything. Just being in, not seeing people, being told we can't go outside, and trying to explain to Mark, to my husband, who would come home, who had been in a workplace. Yes, he'd been in the workplace and gone and sat in his office where he wouldn't see anyone else. But, even just that experience of he was driving in, so driving in and seeing other cars on the road, seeing other people stood about, because the type of building he walks in, he goes past a lot of security. They're all seeing life happening. Whereas for me, our 2-bedroom flat became my entire world for weeks on end. That did so much more damage than I think I appreciated that it was going to.
Because I was going to ask you, how's working at home been for you? Because for me, because I work remotely from most of the rest of our team, I generally work from home if I'm not engaging with stakeholders or in a school teaching. So I wondered how you.
So I'm one of those people. I have a love-hate relationship with working from home. There are times when working from home really works for me, and there are times when it really doesn't. Typically, the times when it really works for me is when there's a purpose to working from home. Now, that purpose could be anything. It could be someone's coming to look at the boiler, so I need to stay in all day. But there's a reason why I'm at home, and that helps me keep focused. Or it could be there's a specific piece of work where I want to give myself the space to think. So I'm going to go and work from home and focus on that specific thing. So I've never viewed myself as the kind of person who would want to totally work from home. I'm the kind of person who likes being in an office. Having people doing things around me helps me. But then I would also say this experience of working from home that we've had, because of COVID, it's a different experience of working from home, because it's an experience of working from home where we are doing lots of video chats and things. So it feels like maybe it's more of the type of experience of working from home that might work for me, where I don't feel like I'm in my own little isolated bubble, but I feel connected and I feel part of something. Honestly, at the moment, I'm struggling a bit again, but I think that's because I've been back at work for a week and a half after not being working for 3.5 months, and I'm kind of having to relearn how do I work? I'm having to relearn this experience. But I have also gone in. I deliberately went in. I'm only working 4 days a week until at least the end of October, because I had annual leave that I had to use up anyway. So, which also for me is, I know we've discussed this off stream, Kate. Is also an experience for me as a chance of seeing actually, does part-time work suit me? Is that something that I might want to think about? Can I make it fit? Can I show work maybe that this could work as a way of working?
Yeah, it's that thing of finding what works for you and how, because I know the work I have done during furlough, I don't structure the same way as I would if I was doing my normal DRM day. So when I'm doing DRM work and I'm working 5 days a week for DRM, if I'm having an at-home office day, I will structure it as if it was an external office day.
Ditto.
So
Yeah.
I have a room space that is just for work, so I will go in that space. All work stays in that space and does not come out of that room. It's one of those ways I compartmentalize my work, I think, in that way.
I know you're like me. I work in here and I stream in here. This is what that would be why I'm in this room.
This is it. I have a desk with numerous computers and things. So, I mean, to be honest, during furlough, this has turned into more of a streaming room, and I bought a nice, shiny new PC that I can work on for all my personal work, and it's absolutely lovely. And I've got a nice new microphone and everything for streaming. So.
I guess another one as well. Thinking about, we've talked a lot about privilege and diversity and understanding the barriers that different communities face. And actually, it's another one that I'm seeing towards the end of this lockdown period, etc. Especially, I can see, and this is about class and about social standing and the access to space and all of these kind of things. And I can see lots of people going, well, why do we ever want to go back to an office? And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but tell that to, like one of my friends, some people may know him online, gamer chat, he's become a cat boy. And he's like, well, I don't want to, we're like, oh, why don't you come play 14? He's like, I don't want to sit at the desk anymore. And like, actually, for those people who aren't fortunate enough to have a separate space that they can use as their workspace, actually we've like it's no longer working from home, it's living at work for some people, and that's horrendous. That's not a good experience, and we all need to understand that we're all in different positions, and some of us can have that space that we can this really works for some of us, it doesn't really work from the others of us. And so talking about this way of like, oh, why would we ever go back into offices? It's like, well, there might be some people who really need to, for whatever reason.
That's my sister was in exactly that space. So she lives alone and she lives in a small flat, and she was working from home. So she ended up ringing her boss and saying, can I actually just come into the office? I know I'm going to be the only person in that office, but
it gives me a space. Yeah.
I need to get out of the house.
Yeah.
Because, she's got a lovely flat, but it's a small flat, and she's got no outside garden or anything like that she can access.
Yeah.
And it was exactly that. She just needed to get out of there, and she found it really worked for her.
Yeah. So, I think similarly as well, like people with, there's someone that I know who is really trying to explain to their employer that yes, I'm working from home, but the schools are all closed, and you have to understand that means I have my children here as well. And that means this has completely transformed my working environment.
Yeah.
I'm having to juggle childcare responsibilities and working, and I'm doing the best I can to juggle those things. But they are things that I have to juggle because the circumstances have dictated that I have to juggle them.
Yeah, and then the situation like coming back to your keyboard to find your cat has just walked across it in the middle of a funding bit that you're typing out. So
I had a little bit of that near the beginning where I was a bit more working on a sofa, because in our London place we'd never bothered putting in a desk or anything, and we have now, because we need that space. But Max, was it Delta, whichever one of the dogs would very much be like, oh, I want to cuddle with you, I want to keep reaching across your lap and getting as far and far as possible across you, like, no, this is a laptop computer. I need you to not be lying on the keyboard, please. Jamie has said, which is very sweet of you, Jamie, I'm making so many notes here, I wish I could just download a transcript after the fact, which is absolutely lovely to say. It is going to go on, it will be on my video on demand here on Twitch, so if you want to watch any of it back, that's possible. I am also going to get back into pushing things across to my YouTube, so it will go and live on my YouTube as well, so it's there beyond the lifespan of what Twitch lets us have for video on demand, which I can never quite remember what it is. It's like a month or something, isn't it? It's something like that. Anyway, it will go live on YouTube, so these will be there. I was about to say forever. That's a scary thought, for all time. I'm imagining us as activists in 20 years coming back and looking at this conversation and just like cringing because the world has moved on so much. And we're like, oh, why did I say this, that, the other? Uno T says, I was still going out about seeing people for work, then coming home and not being able to go out again, which was really weird. Yeah, I can imagine. I think especially at this time, like, we all have to understand we're all having completely different experiences. And we need to be there for each other in those experiences and support each other through those experiences, because, you know, one person's experience that's like a dream is another person's nightmare. So
yeah, really unique and strange times we live in, and it is.
They are such unique and strange times.
You don't know what you're going to wake up to one day to the next, do you? Right now, still. I see all these memes online about it. What was it? Somebody said, I want to see a planner before I start 2021, or, you know, I want advance notice.
Yeah, I saw someone had gone into Paper Chase, I think, which still was trying to sell reduced price diaries. And it had this diary that said like 2020 best year ever. And this person was just like, whoever came up with that idea must be kicking themselves.
Yeah, you know what? I bet there's a lot of unused diaries this year in that way, because I mean, I've used electronic ones, but normally I have a paper diary that goes in my bag and goes everywhere with me anyway, but haven't needed to go anywhere. I mean, I'm like you. I'm thinking about when I get back to working again. It's like remembering how you do things and remembering just getting into, you know, procedure of things. I mean, thinking of people like, you know, working in any cities, and when they go back into those situations, what it's going to be like tackling transport, thinking like London and the tube, what's that going to be like?
Yeah, I had that. I went at the end of, when did recess start? I'm trying to remember when parliamentary recess started. That must have been in July. And so in the middle of July, I went to Westminster, and I got on the tube, and I was sat there, and I was like, this is the first time I've been in the Underground for 3 months. Like, this is normally something that I do every single day, but it's been 3 months, and it's just perplexing and mind-blowing, and it's a different experience. And you know, it makes you I almost wonder whether I'm getting big into mindfulness because my psychologist recommended it, you know, as being, she particularly thought it'd be helpful for me with kind of the combination of issues that I face. And I almost wonder where it's like we're almost being flung, going back into the world, we're being flung into all these activities almost as mindfulness, all these activities that normally we take for granted, and we don't look around at ourselves and we don't really experience them. We're suddenly there and we're looking, you know, and you're looking at everyone with their masks on, you're thinking about the spaces between you, and, you know, it's become a mindful exercise. Because we're experiencing these things almost as if they're the first time again. And I had it again yesterday. I went to the supermarket yesterday with Mark, and I haven't been to the supermarket since we moved here to the house in Derbyshire. So it was the first time I've been in. It was the first time I've been in any shop apart from the little shop we went into in our resort in Corfu for a month. And I was just like, this is so weird. Like, and it's suddenly being brought out of this, you know, this experience where we just go into tunnel vision in these spaces, and looking around you and experiencing them.
Absolutely. You know what? I just made something stick out in my mind as something that was lovely to experience in a different way again. So, me and my partner, because I live in Wales and she lives in Stoke, we were separated for like 15 weeks because of lockdown, because in Wales we couldn't really get out of the country. The first time when it was sort of restrictions were dropped enough so I could go and visit her, and then she became my sort of bubble. To walk through the door, and this is very soppy, but it's so true, just a hug, just to have a hug, and we stood there for, I can't even remember how many minutes. And it was like, you know, before it would be like just standard, give each other a hug as you're leaving, or you know, meet. But we just stood there and we just absolutely savoured it. And it was this thing of, Oh yes, I I can feel everything. I feel my fingertips on your back. I can feel your hands on my back. I can
Yeah,
hear your breath. I can smell you. It was that thing of, oh wow, and it was being mindful and being aware and just soaking all of that
being in
in.
the
You know,
moment.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I love meditation. I do a lot of walking meditation. So
Mhm.
I'm lucky in North Wales. We've got a lot of beautiful scenery out here, and I can just go and 2 minutes from my house, I walk down into a country park, and I can just go out there with some sort of sound or music, or sometimes nothing, and just go and walk in the quiet and just
Yeah.
look at my own footsteps and completely be in that moment. And it really works for me. It's one of the things that gets me by and
Yeah,
relaxes me
I've been doing
daily.
some walking meditation. I find it really interesting because the app that I use has guided walking meditations both for ones in nature and ones in towns and cities.
Mhm.
So you can do it. And in fact, I think they've even got special ones they've done with TFL. So you can even get
Oh
like
wow.
special London ones. Because there's always stuff around us that we can be more mindful of. Um, yeah, I'm getting into meditation. My practice is a bit. It's not daily at the moment. It's. I'm trying to find a routine again. I'd got really into it, and then I went back to work, and it's kind of like I don't know. Maybe I do need to go back to. I was kind of meditating at 10 or 11 in the morning. Maybe I do need to go back to just stopping everything then and meditating. Um, but it just somehow feels like I'm back in like the treadmill of life. And you get to the end of the
Yeah.
day and you suddenly think like, oh, I haven't meditated. I've not even looked at the app I has like a mindful moment every day, and sometimes I'm like, I've not even looked at that. I've got one friend that I keep sending them to, and I'm suddenly like, I've not looked at that to see if I should send him today's one, see if it's one that I think he would like. Um, I'm just quickly looking what's in the chat as well. Unity saying, I hope we hold on to how adaptable we are, and as tough as this has been, we've got through it in our own ways. Evidence that we can get through other things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, no, I completely agree. Um, is there anything else you wanted to chat about?
I don't know.
Anything burning to get off your chest?
You can plug my Twitch channel as
Oh,
well.
absolutely will plug Kate's Twitch channel, of course. So Kate, as well as being one of my colleagues and a friend, is also a fabulous streamer. I'm gonna. In fact, why don't you tell us a bit about what you're streaming, where people can find you? Because instead of me doing a less good job of it.
Twitch.tv/Katie Chaos, which is KAYTEEKHAOS. Yeah, it's all with K's. It's just a bit rock and roll. I stream all sorts, to be honest. I do some chat stuff occasionally, but I play a lot of games just because I enjoy gaming, and it's a good way to meet people and just chat. And also, it educates a little, even if I'm playing a game, and you just if you help change somebody's perceptions of our community, then even better. But mostly because I love the games and I love a wide variety of games. So yeah.
Fabulous. Unity has asked what's the app I use for mindfulness. I use Headspace, Unity, which is one of the most popular ones. And they do have a free trial if you want to give it a try before you try having a subscription. It has been an absolute pleasure, Kate. It's been a really interesting conversation, and thank you for being my first guest, for kind of being thrown in at the deep end without any kind of plan. Because you've heard about it ever since this was a vague idea in my head that I thought I would ask you about. I am soon after the stream. I am also going to be updating my schedule and everything. So if anyone wants to see what my schedule is for the next week, you can. And I'm also really excited to say that next week for this stream, I'm going to have the absolutely fabulous Marvin Lowe joining me, who you may know as Mr. Game and Travel. He is amazing. He's wonderful. And I know he's really keen as well to kind of talk about, and has been talking on his stream about, some of the intersectionality that he faces as a Black gay man living with HIV. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. We're going to have a load to talk about. Probably a lot of the similar things as we've been talking about today, but coming through a different lens, about the stigma within our community. So do please come back for that next Sunday. It'd be nice to see if we have someone we could go and raid to end with, and we could all go and watch a computer game after talking about lots of stuff. Oh, I can hear an echo of myself now, but that shouldn't have come up on the stream. Those all look a bit heavy. Let's go watch. I bet we can watch someone who's playing Fall Guys. Let's just go watch something that's completely just escapist nonsense, because that seems like a good way to end the stream. Nintendo says he's definitely going to come and follow you. Bless you. You are a sweetie, as you always are, and you are yourself a fabulous, fabulous streamer. Let's just add a tag in LGBTQIA. Let's go find someone who's LGBTQ, definitely. And a small one. I like to go and raid small streamers because that's nice, isn't it? As a small streamer, I appreciate people coming and raiding me. So let's pick someone at random. Oh, this one says it's a... No. Oh God, no! I get this. I don't know if everyone else gets this. Indecision is such like one of my mental health things. And I'm now just like, oh my God, there are so many different Fall Guys LGBTQ streams that I could choose from. Oh, this one is called Will I Be a Giraffe Tonight? 100 followers equals giraffe onesie. Okay, we're definitely going over to that one. That is the one. So I'm just gonna put that in and we'll set that up.
It's always good if you've got a large amount and you raid somebody with like 2 or 3 people, and then because when that happens to me, I go into panic mode because I think 18, 19 people, what am I going to do?